I like to collect books. Some call me a hoarder of books, but I don't think that's necessarily true. Because I only really like the old ones, you see. And, well, not every book is old. For example, this one here, this is an encyclopedia of the occult that was pieced together from a couple of other books. And I got this at an estate sale, where I get most of my old books. And one day I was traveling out, cruising around looking for an estate sale to get more old books at, and I found something that I couldn't have expected to find.
At the end of California Street in Crescent City is a place you might have seen before. Walls of mosaic tile border the garden of a large home. The front stoop is made of keys, symbolic of just needing one right key. Along the garden walls, like towers of a castle defense, are orbs clustered with strangeness. All relics of a prolific artist in our community. Who was this artist?
Steve Mattson. I mean, a lot of people in Crescent City had lived here, but he bought the place, I'm not sure when, maybe 30 years ago, and then built onto it and turned it into an art project.
This is Linda Stevens, a friend of Steve's who's been watching the estate for the last 3 years. I was lucky enough to have a conversation with her about Steve over a short afternoon. Steve Mattson was born in Los Angeles on November 23, 1942. As with many people during the 40s, unfortunately, he contracted polio at a young age. After a long journey through rehabilitation and treatments, Steve survived his brush with polio, though not unscathed. This early life experience affected his mind and his health, creating behavioral difficulties, including dyslexia. During the 40s and 50s, dyslexia wasn't well understood or treated. Because of this, he wasn't able to read or write effectively, which resulted in an interesting perspective to create art from. In a world full of books and the written word, Steve was forced to, or perhaps blessed, to express himself in a different way. Where many would have written, Steve sculpted. This form of expression was amplified when he moved into Topanga Canyon.
I met Steve Mattson in Los Angeles in the 60s, and we lived on Old Topanga Canyon, which is very vibrant, artistic things going on there. The Buffalo Springfield had a ranch there. Steve was playing drums with Bruce Palmer, the bass player from the Springfield, and had been kind of hanging out with them, and we all knew each other. His mother had a place on Old Canyon. I lived on Old Canyon. The Springfield lived on Old Topanga Canyon, and it's beautiful out there, oak trees and rocks, and it's in the country for Los Angeles.
Right. With names like Buffalo Springfield, Jim Morrison, and Canned Heat calling Topanga Canyon home, it was simply crawling with the greats of the time. The constraints of post-war America on this generation were blown out and shattered here. Once Steve got a taste of the art bug, he simply couldn't stop. His style of art was unconventional to say the least, though it found a home in a growing school of art called California assemblage art. That started with George Herms. Of course, a style can be inspired by many things, but the content might come from somewhere else. Where did Steve get his inspiration for his art?
A lot of it came from his travels in Mexico, where he picked up, he just liked things that were colorful and interesting, and he liked things that were often bizarre and alarming. His goal was he was like a little boy trying to scare people. With his sculptures. Right. And once again, his influences were the California assemblage artists of the 60s. This is the kind of thing they did. They would just put together all kinds of stuff, but those that had an eye for balance and color and how to make it look really cool. For instance, nobody I knew did this goofy little piece. But this is an example of assemblage art. Yeah. I don't know who made this, because I don't think it was Steve. But this is an example of California assemblage art where somebody just where they just see things falling together in a certain way. Right. And they have an idea in their mind that they're trying to express.
At the 21st Annual Junk Art Exhibition in Eureka, he took second place and had his works in the Crescent Harbor Gallery in Crescent City. The art of assemblage, also known as junk art, is still alive and kicking down in Eureka, where new practitioners of junk art take up the mantle that Steve left for them. This year was the 26th annual junk art exhibition at the Morris Graves Museum of Art. Originally a Carnegie Free Library, the Humboldt Arts Council got custody of the building recently and has been using the space to document all forms of art. While I was down there, I had a conversation with Jemima, the executive director and curator at the Morris Graves, about this year's exhibition.
Yes, so this is the first year since the pandemic hit that we've had junk art. We were closed on and off and didn't do any kind of big major group exhibitions during the years that we thought it wasn't as safe to have as many people in the building. So this year was definitely not as big as past years of junk art. We used to have upwards of over 100 works of art entered. I believe we had 68 this year. And you'll see as you go around on the labels, there are some artists that had 2 pieces accepted, possibly 3 in the exhibition, but every single artist that entered this year did get a piece in the show, which is nice. It really is a community-wide effort and exhibition, so I think it's really important to, keep people motivated and excited about it so that they'll come back and enter again in the future.
If 68 pieces is a small exhibition for this art style, that means there's a very large community around this kind of art. What brings a community like that together?
I think environmentally, there's so many reasons for people to reuse materials. There's definitely, obviously, a movement of that recently, but the Humboldt Arts Council obviously started this, it would be 28 years ago, with minus those 2 years of the pandemic. So it was definitely something back then that was a popular exhibition as well. But I think as we move forward and been more into recycling and things like that, it's definitely become more, impactful in the way that we create art, use art and materials, and it's a great way to keep them out of the landfill.
Knowing that, at least partially, these people come together over environmental art and recycling, it begs the question, what makes something junk art?
So for our rules, everything has to be 100% recycled, except you can use new adhesive, because obviously you would need hot glue or whatever it be, and anything that would be, the pieces that would attach the work can be new, but otherwise everything else has to be 100% recycled.
With all this environmental impact, and that there is such a large community surrounding junk art, I had to know, what was Jemima's favorite piece from this year?
I would say this year, I can't help it, but my favorite piece would be Amy Leon's, which is the landscape back on that wall. It actually did win Best of Show as well. So I'm not the only one that thought it was absolutely fantastic. She's someone that enters almost every single year, and she definitely, this is her piece as well. Definitely has a certain style about her, regardless of what materials she's using. It's like you almost can always tell, oh, that's Amy's work. And in the past, we've seen her create things out of rusted refrigerator fronts. I mean, it's such a cool process that she does, and she's really made a difference in the junk art show for sure.
After crawling down this rabbit hole of environmental art and the hippies of the 60s, I learned a few things. The art of assemblage has a wealth of pieces in it, many of which aren't well known in the larger community. That what we leave behind has an impact on everything, both environmentally and culturally. And I learned about one man's journey through life, making art from the things he has lying around. To think, all this started with an estate sale that I wandered by. This has been Sebastian for Redwood Voice.